social media. Is there any kind of legal distinction that the judge might be determining between something that he writes or something that he reposts? Is there any distinction there?
That did come up in the oral argument. And the problem for the former president is that not all of the posts that he made were simply reposting. So his attack on the jurors, he added, as Donald Trump added his own words. He wasn't simply forwarding, even if you were to take that argument. And I think that's a pretty far-fetched argument. I mean, let's just get real here. If you were in good faith trying to comply with that gag order, you simply would have asked your counsel, or you would have asked the court before you did it if you were really trying to do it. I mean, just to your point, Andrea, that this is Donald Trump goading the judge to do this. And I think the reason is he'd much rather have all of us talk about his being jailed than to talk about the evidence at the trial. So he wants to play the martyr. He wants to have this happen so that there's another story that is not simply covering what I think is going to be a lot of damaging evidence, starting with David Pecker, who is back on the stand today talking about the fact that he was in cahoots with Donald Trump to essentially only give favorable coverage to Donald Trump and negative coverage to Donald Trump's adversaries. So again, I think this is really a very standard tactic for Donald Trump, which is just try and change the narrative.
And to that point, Chuck, I'm reading a note here from Lisa Rubin, who is in the overflow room, I believe, and she's talking about the fact that Pecker is describing his conversations with Michael Cohen and with his editor, I guess it was executive editor Jillian Howard, about what was going to happen in the 2015-2016 campaign. And Pecker told his employee that this arrangement of killing stories and stories that had come that were negative stories had to be kept a secret because they were going to try to help the campaign, and to do that, it had to stay quiet. So in almost every regard, the amount of money that was being paid, the whole catch and kill scheme, the checkbook journalism was not, of course, unusual for these tabloids, but everything was geared to getting him elected. And I think, just parenthetically, our colleague Rachel Maddow last night showed the covers, and the covers are what really matters for the National Enquirer, because people don't buy it for the content, as Pecker testified yesterday. They buy it for the cover. They see it as they're going to every supermarket in America. And just about all of the 2016 covers that they showed, at least, were about, Trump wins this, Hillary is a terrorist, Hillary is terrible. I mean, it was just crazy stuff.
Right. So, Andrea, Mr. Pecker's testimony is important because it helps to set the scene. The government chose him as its first witness, and for a reason. I mean, you want to give the jury context, not just about Mr. Pecker's relationship with Mr. Trump, but how the newspaper, that's not an accurate term, the periodical that they published would engage in catch and kill and would help Mr. Trump by killing certain stories and help Mr. Trump by running others that were unfavorable to his opponents. Laying out that relationship in detail is important. It helps explain not just the context to the jury, but why the jury should trust Mr. Pecker and others who will later corroborate, this relationship when they get on the stand. The devil is in the details, Andrea, and it seems to me smart to start off a trial this way.
But, Andrew, that's not illegal. That's unethical. That's, bad campaign. Well, not bad campaign practice, I guess, if it works, but it's certainly not journalistically ethical. That said, how do you get to the felony here?
So it is important to know that the crime charge is false business records, but in order for this to be a felony, it's false business records that were part of a cover-up that was furthering and concealing election fraud. That is the way in which the DA opened. And so you have all sorts of campaign violations, campaign finance violations that the DA is alleging, and that the money that was being used, whether it was for paying off the doorman or Karen McDougal or Stormy Daniels, which is the heart of the case, are all, according to the DA, forms of election campaign fraud and part of that conspiracy. That is an element that makes the false business records a felony and not just a misdemeanor. But to your point, the bad journalist practice, if you step back and think about the big picture that's being presented to us, this case, just like the Fox and Dominion civil case, is a form of this country really not adhering to its principles with respect to the role of the fourth estate. It is much closer to what you expect in countries like Russia and authoritarian regimes. The idea that the media is in cahoots with a member of one party to get that person elected is simply not how this country operates or is supposed to operate. And we now have seen this both with respect to the testimony today from the National Enquirer, but we also saw it with respect to Fox News and Dominion. That sort of fundamental principle of how the fourth estate works is really undermined, and it shows that Donald Trump, for all of his alleging fake news, this trial is showing that he is actually at ground zero of fake news, and he was using that to get elected.
And Andrew and Chuck, stand by for just a second. I want to get back to Vaughn on the latest of the testimony from the Google documentary that